All right, welcome everyone to this presentation where we're going to be talking about coaching for growth and wellbeing. My name is Associate Professor Be Pannell. I'll be taking you through the most of the information in this session, but before I start, I'm going to hand it over to the expert here, my colleague Miles Hindle. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you, Bea. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ACAP Coaching and Growth and Wellbeing Experience session. My name is Miles. I'm one of the ACAP National Course Advisors. In tonight's session, myself and ACAP Course Leader and Associate Professor for MBA and Coaching, Be Pannell, will be taking you through the coaching experience for promoting growth and wellbeing. In the spirit of reconciliation, ACAP acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and extend that respect to all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. In this session, we'll cover a brief overview of ACAP. We'll hear from one of our current coaching students, Tina, and then we'll jump into the session with Bea as she helps us explore coaching and providing some practical tips and information on coaching and pathways. At any stage, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to post them in the chat function. Myself, David, Shelley, and Shika will be able to answer these as we go along. So, who are we? ACAP is the Australian College of Applied Professions. We have been delivering specialist courses in the helping professions for over 38 years now, since 1983. We are national providers of these programs, delivering on-campus studies in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth, and very recently Byron Bay. We can also cater for living rurally internationally through our online and blended delivery modes. The coaching course is done online delivery, and you can select this for coaching. It's a fantastic way to build your career and start something new while still being flexible. However, ACAP doesn't just provide coaching programs. You may also be familiar with our other disciplines such as social work, counselling, criminology and psychology. Each of these disciplines have their own delivery methods that you can choose from. And we are happy to discuss these and what may suit you. Since ACAP was founded, we have been successfully graduating students and have graduated over 20,000 students nationwide, having them industry ready upon completion of their qualifications. At ACAP, we encourage and promote diversity. We support students from all walks of life and promote equity, sustainability, and advocacy for every community. We hold regular catch-ups for those who are interested in getting involved, meet like-minded individuals, and develop lasting connections. We have seen extracurricular initiatives and programs like this don't just boost student morale, but help them flourish in their studies and peer-to-peer support. So why do students choose ACAP? It's a combination between the support services available and the quality of education. We have live workshops with personal learning, and our educators all have industry experience. The courses are accredited with international coaching accreditation, with the International Coaching Federation, I should say. The 3 intakes a year make it more flexible for our students to pick up learning when it suits them. And the fees are supported by fee help, student loans, or upfront payment. ACAP doesn't just support you in your class. We have various networks and support services available to ensure you get the most out of your studies. and excel in your personal and professional growth. Services such as student learning support, who run regular webinars and workshops and have how-to guides, video tutorials, and even their own website where all the useful information can be found. Giving you more independence throughout your journey. They even have sessions where they're happy to sit one-on-one, organise study plans, and other important things that may help you with your assessments, such as academic writing, referencing, and presenting. We even have a free confidential counselling service available to our students. So now that you know about ACAP in general, I'd like to hand over to Tina, a current student in our graduate certificate in Applied Coaching and Be Pannell Discipline Head.
Thanks, Miles. Just coming off mute there. There's always a bit of a delay. Welcome, everyone. As Miles said, my name is Tina. I'm actually studying the graduate certificate in applied coaching. So I thought I'd start by sharing a bit about my background, a bit of context as to my why, and then a little bit about my experience with the course. My background is in human resource management. I've worked within the corporate sector in leadership and consulting roles, particularly in organizational learning and development. So adult learning is something that I'm acutely sort of aware and a specialist in. And I've worked across financial services, vocational education, and now I'm in a not-for-profit. So over the last 20 plus years, the roles that I've done have incorporated an element of coaching individuals, whether that's in a leadership role or whether I'm playing an active sort of project lead role, or more recently, helping individuals achieve career success. But the biggest part of a lot of the roles that I worked in was just influencing people in general, particularly senior stakeholders, to help drive strategic goals. So over these years, I started to realize that coaching is a very complex area, and it comes with great responsibility. So I started to research some study options that would support my own performance, but also my own self-awareness as an individual. And also I started to notice, because I was working in that career space, that many employers are now seeking formal qualifications as the area of coaching research starts to grow. So I chose ACAP because I found myself going through their website, understanding that they've just got a great reputation. Be Pannell in particular, and I didn't know she was going to be on this call right up front. As the course leader, I looked online at LinkedIn and looked at her background and her experience, and that really appealed to me. So that swayed my decision to go with ACAP. From an experience perspective, in my opinion, I think ACAP is very unique. The actual course is designed in a sense that it combines theory and practical sessions, but the practical sessions aren't, sessions that are simulated. They're real world examples, and the assignment topics themselves and the requirements of those assignments are also a great blend of bringing sort of evidence-based theory and leadership best practice to life. And what I enjoyed, particularly because I'm a hands-on learner, is that pragmatic approach. I also really enjoyed the lectures and meeting other professionals and newcomers to the coaching field. What we found is we've created a bit of a community of practice on LinkedIn. Some of us have taken up these student learning support services, but we've also got an informal learning team going where we have study pods, we catch up regularly online, and it's been great doing it virtually because we've now got a network of to-be coaches across the country. So in my opinion, as particularly because I've worked in adult education for so long, I think the course is designed really well. I do have to say though that there's a lot of reading to do. So make sure that you're really organized so that you can get that reading done, because you will get the most out of it. Personally, my aim is to move into the executive coaching space full time. Maybe starting as a in-house coach for an organization and then progressing to an executive coach and running my own practice. So I think studying the applied coaching at ACAP will actually get me to that goal. and get the ICF accreditation. So look forward to meeting some of you either through LinkedIn or through this program. I still have one more unit left. Thanks, guys. Over to you, Bea.
Great, thanks, Tina. Really lovely to hear a bit about your experience. And I remember our initial conversation when you were thinking about enrolling, maybe 6 months ago even. And it's been really great to see your progression and your understanding of coaching deepen and your enthusiasm as you've gone through this course. So super quick, a little bit about me. As Tina mentioned, if you want, you can find me on LinkedIn. So I've developed this course, the Graduate Certificate in Applied Coaching, and we've gone through the process now to have this course formally accredited with the International Coaching Federation, which means that by you doing this graduate certificate course, then you'll have almost all the steps that you need apart from your own coaching hours to then go and apply to be an ICF accredited coach and a member. I've worked with thousands of people over many years in coaching, leadership coaching, consulting, education, and in the past I moved into coaching from a business background and also a psychology background. And my interest is really thinking about with the change in the workplace with artificial intelligence and all sorts of different technologies, what does that mean for leaders and how can we really step up as leaders, both in our psychological capacity, our leadership capacity, even the way we think and understand and work with complex problems and how we work together to really meet the challenges of the workplace in the future. And I do think that coaching is a really integral part of that. But enough about me and enough about Tina and enough about ACAP. I'd really love to hear just a little bit about you. So for those of you who are joining us live, really love for you to jump into the chat box. Don't be shy and just say your first name or your preferred name and just anything about your interest in coaching. So really love to have a sense of who's on this call. For me, whenever we're doing classes, it's actually never really a lecture. It's always a dialogue. It's always a two-way conversation. So I'd like to start that dialogue now and just love to hear from each of you who are interested in this course. What's your name and what is it that's motivating you? We've had people in the past who want to take coaching into sports or working with teenagers or in business, people with HR backgrounds, people working for non-government and non-profit organizations and so on. So jump in and love to hear a little bit about who's on the call. Demogene, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You're really interested in coaching high performance tech teams and junior managers, so great. Gigi, not sure your name, but you're curious, so it looks like you're still exploring, so good. Hopefully I will address some of that curiosity in what we're going to talk about this evening. Love to hear from, it's Gabrielle. There you go. Thanks, Gabrielle. Julie, love to hear what's you're interested in coaching as well. And anyone else, feel free to jump in. So in the live classes, just so you have a sense of this, that it's actually one of the requirements even is that as much as possible that you're ready to, like Tina did, come off, mute, come with your cameras on, ready to engage in a conversation. So we try and make the classes as much as possible feel like as if you were in a classroom. You've just got that sort of added convenience of being able to study from wherever you are in the world. So Sam, you're a trainer and assessor and you have diploma in youth work and community services. Great. So having a coaching skill when you're working with young adults and teenagers and so on can be really, really helpful. One of the things with coaching is it's about the science of behavioral change and motivation. So even in the very first class, you'll find that you're starting to learn about what it is that we can do and say, and mostly as a coach, what are the kinds of questions we can ask to really help to tap into someone's motivation. So you will learn a little bit of psychology. It's not overly technical, but you learn enough psychology to understand how you as a coach can work with people to help them shift their behavior. And also, Sam, you're interested in working in adult learning. Fantastic. Julie, working in the education sector. Love to learn and understand how to coach staff and students. Yes. So there's been a real movement in many organisations, a really positive movement where leaders and managers are using coaching skills as a way of leading and managing their staff. So rather than telling someone what to do or waiting till they make a mistake and sort of trying to fix it, actually coaching and developing our staff. Some of it, of course, might be technical, but more and more so it's about helping to develop the next generation of leaders, helping to get people to work through their decision-making process or their presentation skills or their confidence. And as a manager and a leader, once you have those coaching skills under your belt, it really transforms the kinds of relationships you have with your staff and can make a really big difference in how you're working with them. So feel free, anyone else, to jump in and tell us a little bit more about yourself. And I'm going to now go through a little bit of content because I want to make sure that you're left with something that is useful out of this session. So before I go through just a few slides on how coaching might work in certain scenarios, I'd love you to take a moment to just reflect on something that you're facing right now that's challenging. It might be trying to get back into a fitness routine after lockdown, or, you know, trying to juggle homeschooling, or, you know, getting back into the workplace, or whatever it might be. And of course, this is confidential. I wouldn't expect you to share this with anyone, but just take a few moments if you can, because I want this to be relevant to you. What is there one thing that you'd like to change about this challenge? So sometimes we make things really big, you know, run a marathon, and sometimes it can be about, you know, breaking it down. Well, you know what, I want to have a running streak where I run 5 days out of 7 every week between now and January. And you might use a streak type app, which counts however many times you've completed an activity to do that. So when we're coaching, we can look with a big goal, but also we're always breaking it down to something smaller. And then the third question before we move on is, what resources do you currently have to face this? So it might be, well, I've got a good running technique. I've got great gym gear. I just bought some stuff in the sales. I've, you know, got a great, you know, soundtrack, whatever it might be. Just thinking about, you know, maybe that's even an almost trivial example, but the particular challenge you're thinking about, what is the one thing you want to really focus on? What resources do you already have? And my intention is by the end of, say, about 4 or 5 slides as we go through, you'll actually have some additional resources that you can then apply to the particular scenario. So good to have this in the forefront of your mind. So what is coaching? Basically, very simply, it's a goal-focused conversation. And most of coaching is based on questions. As much as possible, we ask, not tell. So we use questions to help shift someone's mindset. And a really simple metaphor is like a Rubik's Cube where one side's red and blue and yellow and so on. The coaching just helps the person to see the situation from all the different angles. And often it's when we start to really look at things from different angles, and you might use some coaching psychology tools there, that's when you can start to go, oh, I didn't make that connection, or, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that, or, oh, I didn't realize that you know, particular pattern or habit was linked to such and such. And having those insights is really where all the scientific psychological research shows that's where behavioral change happens. So when we use questions to help the other person understand themselves and their own way of making meaning, that in turn has a major shift in behavior. Now, there's some really famous frameworks. If you are into Google, you might want to just check this one out if you're not aware already. The GROW framework, which is kind of coaching 101. It's the way that you can have a conversation with someone and you structure it on, okay, person, tell me what's your goal. The R stands for reality. So tell me what's actually happening right now. O stands for options. Okay, based on what you've now told me, what options do you have to move towards your goal? And then the way forward is, you know, okay, now what steps are you going to take? So that can be applied, say, for example, in that running scenario, my goal is to run, what did I say, 5 days a week out of 7 between now and the new year. The reality is at the moment, I'm only running 3 days a week, or I haven't even started. But in a coaching scenario, you might spend a fair bit of time on the reality and helping the coachee to identify if they've got any particular beliefs or attitudes or even values and things that might be getting in the way of meeting that goal. And then it might be looking at options. So a coaching question I might ask is, how can you keep yourself accountable? Do you have a running buddy? Is there someone else that you can partner with in some way that can help for you to really meet this goal? We might also go back to the reality and go, well, what might be in the way of you meeting this goal? And then look at how we can support the individual to clear what's in the way. And then at the very end of that coaching conversation, all right, so what are you now committed to? And really we get very granular with what the person's working with. So very simple coaching conversation there. If you're quite new to coaching or you're super keen, just check out Grow literally on YouTube, and there's lots of people giving demonstrations of using Grow in coaching. Another really great example is the solution-focused framework. So you have a goal, and the main issue with solution focus is we don't focus on the problem, we focus on the solution. So in the running example, it might be, can you tell me a time when you've been able to run 5 days out of 7? Yeah, it was fantastic, and I did this, and I lost all this weight, and I, got in a marathon. And you get someone really excited by, a solution, a time when this thing was working. And then the next question would be, okay, what were you doing then that you can now replicate here? What can you learn from this experience? Another example might be someone that's, not very confident with public speaking. And it could be, give me an example. Can you find an example where you did actually speak up and it worked? Yeah, it was at the soccer field, and, I get on the sidelines and I don't hesitate. All right, what is it in that scenario that you can use that can help you in the boardroom or in the meeting? And so we're looking at helping the person identify resources they already have to help move forward. So just some really, really simple frameworks there. Coming back to yourself, encourage you to think about that one challenge that we talked about in the previous slide. And already you might start to think about how you could apply Grow to yourself, or you could apply some solution-focused thinking to this challenge. So coaching psychology is a bit of a mouthful, but basically psychology is so well researched around behavioural change that there's now a kind of follow-on movement in the coaching field where we're using techniques like, in psychology, it's cognitive behavioural therapy. In coaching, it's cognitive behavioural coaching. And you'll learn how to do that in the course, which is to help shift someone's thinking to then shift their emotion and their behaviour. And lots of other techniques that you could say, beg, borrow and steal from psychology and bring it into coaching. There's been lots of evidence now, so we know what works and what doesn't work. So we would say that the coaching psychology is what makes coaching a profession, because we're only using techniques that have the science behind them. And so coaching psychology and psychological approaches to coaching, you can use it anywhere. In particular, in this course, we do focus on leadership coaching and coaching in the workplace. But I would say, even to be a parent, you need to be a good leader. In any scenario, leadership can show up. So it's really up to you as to how you interpret that. So I'm just going to pause there because there was a little bit of information. I'll just check if there's any questions in the chat box. And as I'm going through this, feel free to throw your questions in, and a couple of slides down the track, I'll pause again and see if there's any other questions. So no questions yet, but feel free to jump in and throw them in there. And if it's a question about coaching, I'll answer it in a couple of minutes. All right, so just coming back to that Grow, because I wanted to get really practical. So if you were to put into place the Grow framework and you're coaching someone else, literally these are the questions. So if you get a chance, take a screenshot of this. We can also send out this slide deck once the presentation is over. But if you're, say, working with someone and you're wanting to put your coaching hat on, you might start by literally saying to them, what would you like to focus on? What's important to you today? At the end of our time together, our conversation, what would you like to achieve? So it's a deliberate question that's getting the person to narrow down. Sometimes you can spend, say, out of an hour coaching session, you can even spend 45 minutes swimming around the issue where the person hasn't quite got clear on what their goal is. And once they've got the goal, sometimes that means they're so clear on it, they're off and running. So it doesn't always have to be absolutely black and white at the beginning, but it's certainly the conversation is geared towards really getting clear on what are we focused on. Now, the reality is just what's happening now. So literally the question here you can see is, well, what's happening at the moment? What have you already done? What's in the way? What's this like? It's basically letting the coachee tell the story. And sometimes, people can spend the whole coaching session just almost like debriefing and venting around the reality before they even get into options, because there's so much going on for them. But as the coachee, so the person being coached, as they start to explore the reality, hopefully you're asking questions that help for them to see that reality from different perspectives. So, a question might be, I wonder what your boss thinks about this, or I wonder if anyone else has noticed, or I wonder, it's just those sorts of questions that help for them to see things differently. I wonder what you might have done if you weren't under so much pressure. So questions that just keep opening up and exploring that sense of reality. Now, options is we're starting to get a little bit more narrowed down. So out of everything we've got on the table, we've got our goal, that's a sort of general thing that we're moving towards. We've got all these issues on the table. All right, so now where are we going? And the coaching conversations, very much we follow the direction of the coachee. So what would you like to focus on? What options would you like to explore? Out of all these things that we've talked about, what's the most important thing? And we're just kind of getting that person in that coaching session to really start to narrow down. What are the pros and cons of this option? So it might be, right, I'm going to resign. That's it. I'm done. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time in the coaching conversation, perhaps looking at the pros and cons of that. And if I do have, say, a coachee who decides that in a session, I'll probably at least have follow-up sessions. Usually I book sessions in bulk, say 6 to 8 sessions at a time. And if someone comes to that, insight straight away, we tend to put the brakes on it a little bit. I check in with them, and we might say, okay, if this is something you're just going to decide to do, what do you need to do to make sure that you're making the right decision? So we're always exploring the reality, the options, and taking our time to make sure that things are really nutted out. And then W, some people call it will or way forward. It's now out of everything we've talked about. What will you now focus on, say, for the next week or between now and our next coaching session? What are you committed to doing here? So I'm hoping, as I've gone through just some of those questions, that you're actually applying this to yourself, thinking about what you would like to focus on, that we spoke about with those 3 circles at the beginning, thinking about the reality for you, what's currently happening, how might other people see this, what else might be going on here that you haven't quite noticed. Thinking now about the options, narrowing it down a little bit more, getting a bit more granular about what you might want to focus on, and then deciding on 1 or 2 things that are going to now be on your to-do list. And then what I would always do in a coaching setting is, how will you make sure that you keep yourself accountable? So for me, I put everything in my calendar with reminders, and it beeps and says, call mum, or whatever it might be. So, I've got my own little technique. Each person hopefully has their own, but how do you make sure that you meet that particular obligation? You're not sort of scrambling to get something done, 5 minutes before your next coaching session, because you don't want to show up to the coaching session with your homework not done. So really basic framework there that may be helpful. All right. Another thing that I wanted to sort of plant the seed in, and this is a really big part of the course, is the coaching mindset. And you can see in that top left-hand corner, the focus of coaching is asking, not telling. The idea is, if I give advice, I'm actually presuming I know more than you. I'm actually presuming you don't know the answers, that you need my help. And it can actually be quite a condescending kind of approach, that I'm the expert and you're the junior, and so on. So the mindset is, we believe that the individual, as much as possible, has the resources and the wisdom and the insight within them, and that our role is to ask questions to help them access that. So the coaching conversation is a dialogue. Often I won't say a lot. I'll actually be listening, lots of verbal nods, a few questions, and then the client's off and running. But it's not like a monologue, or it's not like a hierarchy where I'm telling someone what to do or lecturing them. As I've mentioned, the client already has the answers, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. So my focus is listening really, really deeply. And often when I'm listening deeply, I'll notice something that the client might not have noticed, and then I'll ask a question about that. So I might say, I notice each time you speak about your manager, you roll your eyes. I'm just wondering if you've noticed that, and if there's anything that might be there that's worth us exploring. And then all of a sudden, something else comes out that helps us to look at the situation from another perspective. So it really comes down to this bottom right-hand quadrant we've got here. This idea of, came from my colleague, Tony Grant, change the viewing to change the doing. So when we change how we see something, it then changes the action. So again, coming back to your own situation, just thinking about how you might apply this to yourself. And then I think I've got a couple more points, and then I'll pause again. So questions that can help to support a dialogue, and it can be really helpful to have some of these questions almost memorized when you're going into coaching mode. What does this mean? Is there anything else here? What do you think? How do you feel about that? What's your take on that? What's the best thing or the worst thing about this? What's the toughest thing? What else comes to mind? All of these are examples of the kinds of questions that really open up that dialogue and that conversation. So I'll just pause there and see if anyone's got any questions for me before I keep moving on. All right, so any technical questions I'll come back to a little bit later. I've got a few more coaching questions, and this comes from one of the readings. You can look up this reference if you want, from David Clutterbuck. And powerful coaching questions, he would say things like, I'm curious about the fact that it seems that, and whatever, you say something about an observation. Or I'm noticing, and that might be that example I said, I'm noticing when you speak about your manager, you roll your eyes. Or I'm wondering, what might this be like for you? Or I'm wondering what other options you might have here. And then it's coming back to, well, what are you noticing here? So we bring that curious mindset, and we encourage our coachee to have that curious mindset. Or tell me about, or would you like to explore this from the perspective of? I don't tend to use the statement tell me, I tend to turn it into an ask. Would you like to explore this from the perspective of your manager? Or what would it be like if we explore this from the perspective of your manager? And then assume the opposite is true. So say you're no good at public speaking. What about the opposite? Is you're fantastic at public speaking? What's that like? And does that seem real to you? And then often even just trying on these different beliefs and attitudes can bring up other layers of like, no, I actually had this with a client, I just remembered. This woman says, I like being in the background. And then the issue came up in coaching where she wanted to be successful, and she realized that to be successful, she had to be in the limelight. So I said, just as a thought experiment, what might happen if you're successful and you're in the limelight? She's like, oh my God, that's really scary. And then we really started to explore some of the fear that was linked to that. And it ended up being quite a pivotal moment for her, because she hadn't realized that she had these two conflicting kind of values. One was to be successful, and the other one was to stay out of the limelight. And when we plugged them both into each other and saw that there was all this fear around it, and then started to unpack that a bit more, then it really started to shift things for her. So just some examples of some questions that you might want to bring to either yourself or to someone else when you're coaching them. So I wanted to just finish off with a quick little example. So a client that I've worked with recently, and actually there's been a number of them, comes to coaching really exhausted from COVID, working from home, lockdown, homeschooling young children. And this particular client wanted the coaching to focus on just improving well-being. It's not even about, being a powerhouse at work, but actually just how do I get by without losing my temper with my kids and, getting completely exhausted at work. And so in terms of applying GROW, the focus on improving her well-being was a kind of goal, but it was actually very general. So what we did is we stayed more with the reality, and I got her to explore more what was like lockdown like, tell me a bit more about the exhaustion, about homeschooling. And as we started to unpack that, out of that, it became really important that what she was finding, she had zero time for herself. So then her goal became, I want time to myself every day. I need time away from the kids, away from Zoom every day. So then we started to talk about, okay, if that's the goal, now what are your options? All right, I'm going to get my partner between, whatever it was, I think it was in the mornings, 7 and 9 a.m. My partner does all the housework and everything else and all the kids stuff. And that's when I go off and go for a swim. And so that was her way forward. She turned it into something really practical. And then we talked about how she could implement that to make sure it happened. And it really just started to shift that sense of exhaustion because, although she had all that going on, at least she could have that swim however many days a week she decided to do it. And it started to really, open up some space for her around how she was feeling. So that was that idea of changing that viewing to change the doing. So changing that it feels like my life's just one big sort of mountain of duties to, okay, I can create some space here. I can see some space for myself. So that can really help in how I respond here. So I'm hoping that little example might even be relevant to some of us, me included, just to create that sort of time out for ourselves. It's so important. But hopefully you can see just a really simple way of how, say, the GROW framework can be applied. So just checking again the chat and seeing if there's any other questions. Looks like not, which is handy. So I'm now just going to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit more about the coaching program itself. But before we do, if you just come back to that challenge that you considered at the beginning and looking at the left-hand circle, how will you hold yourself accountable to measure your success? Actually, before we get to that one, what resources on the right-hand side do you now have to navigate this challenge? Are there other things that you can do as a result of those few pointers that I've thrown in there that you can bring now to this challenge? And we're going anti-clockwise around this circle. What's the one thing you're now committed to doing to addressing this challenge? What one action can you take? And finally, how will you hold yourself accountable to measure that? So it's pretty much that process that we've been talking about. So I do hope you've been able to apply some of these ideas to yourself so that you've got a little bit out of this personally as well. So the Graduate Certificate in Applied Coaching is basically taught by experienced executive and leadership coaches. So everyone has actually close to 20 years experience, each of them, in working with very senior people in lots of different scenarios, one-on-one and group and independent and in organisations. As mentioned, this is an International Coaching Federation credentialed qualification. That's a mouthful. And it basically means that once you get your hours up, the coaching hours that the ICF needs you to do, which is on their website if you need to get a bit more information, we give you the paperwork that says that you have completed an ICF accredited course. And so that means it's basically you get your hours up, you need to finish one final online exam that the ICF asks you to do, and then you can become an ICF accredited coach. So it's pretty straightforward. The other thing, as Tina mentioned, we really do, and hopefully I've tried to demonstrate it just briefly tonight, focus on applied knowledge that can be used immediately. So everything we teach you is, all right, go and practice this. And often in the class scenarios, you'll go off into little breakout rooms and you might either talk or share it together, or you might even coach each other in small little moments so that straight away you're starting to practice different techniques and so on. And as I mentioned, you're learning how to develop that coaching mindset, and that mindset can really help in if you're in a leadership role to help for people to basically work out solutions for themselves. So, a couple of people I've coached get a reputation as a manager where someone says, "What should I do here?" And the leader who's using their coaching approach says, "Well, what options do you have? What do you think? What have you explored so far?" And so they're actually working with the staff member to come up with the solutions together rather than just answering the question of like, do that. Because we all know, you tell someone, okay, here's the answer, they'll come back the next time wanting another answer and you get pestered and you're not actually developing your staff to think through those sort of challenges themselves. So in terms of if you were to do this graduate certificate, so it's basically 4 different units, usually completed over, say, 2 trimesters, which is about 8 months, if you're doing 2 units per trimester, or you could do 1 unit per trimester or any combination. So that means it would take you 4 trimesters, which is a year and about 4 months, because you can do 3 trimesters a year. So if you need a little bit more breakdown as to how that works, then I suggest you have a chat to a course advisor and sort of talk through your own personal scenario there. So the course is for professionals looking to transition into leadership coaching, professionals looking to use coaching as part of their current practice. So this might be people that are in a leadership role, or people that are in a consulting role. We've had people that are doing, say, counselling type work and wanting to move into coaching. And also we get people that are already coaches, and Tina mentioned that, who are wanting that ICF certification and that in-depth knowledge and practice. The entry requirements, basically you need an undergraduate degree in a similar discipline. So, psychology, leadership, anything that sort of shows that you've already had experience in the field. We've got a list on our website. If you haven't got a degree in a similar discipline of leadership coaching, counselling, psychology, social work, and so on, then we ask that you have 5+ years experience working in a role where you're leading and managing others, because it is a postgraduate course. So we do presume a certain level of knowledge and understanding. As we mentioned at the outset, we offer quite a lot of support in any academic writing of essays and things. You get some one-on-one support for that as well. But we do think that, you'll get the most out of this course if you've already got an undergraduate degree under your belt. Career pathways. So students could expect to gain employment in areas such as human resources, working in people and culture programs, working as an internal coach, working as an external coach. There's lots of different combinations, having your own coaching practice. Some people work for coaching organizations that then go and get big coaching change projects in organizations. You can work in a consultancy capacity. Some people use the information and focus more on training and teaching and development, or other kinds of facilitation and so on. Now, I just wanted to flag the timetable because the ICF asks that we don't teach coaching via recording. So there is a requirement with the ICF that you do actually show up to class. So the fundamentals of coaching theory and practice is our kind of base unit, and that's timetabled with a Sydney time zone at the moment on Mondays 4 till 7, starting on the 7th of February. So have a look at your calendars. Hopefully that works for you. And if not, you can actually start with the coaching for professional wellbeing, which is Wednesdays that same week. So that would be the 9th of February. And those two are the sort of starting units. And then once you've done those two, then most people would then go on to do the leadership and the applied coaching skills, and you've got the times there. So as daylight savings changes, these times stay locked in Sydney time zone, just to be aware. We have tried offering classes in other times like Saturdays and in the mornings. We just haven't found it to be as popular. So we do hope that that timetable works for you as much as best as possible. We're hoping that for most people, it means that they can leave work a little early and still have, most of the evening to themselves. Okay, so that's all that I needed to cover for now, and we're pretty much at time. So just wanted to stop and pause and see if anyone had any questions in the chat box. I'll also stop the recording, so if anyone wants to come off mute and just ask questions live as well, I can answer those as well. So for those listening to the recording, thank you for listening, and you've got the contact details to follow up with us. We'd really love to hear from you and have a bit more of a conversation about this course moving forward, and I'll stop the recording now. So thank you, everyone.